would my dad put me here? He'll kill us! He'll kill all of us!
This is for everyone's good. Just to prove that what you are seeing is impossible.
I'm somebody! Somebody help me, please! Here, but now they're gone. Seasons don't feel. You know, they say we only use 10% of our brain. Can you imagine what would happen if we unlocked the other 90%? Anthony, I'm not here! I have to wake up! No!
This is Lisa Wilcox, and you are listening to Geeks of the Industry.
Geeks of the Industry.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to witness some scenes from the next attraction to play this picture, truly one of the most unusual ever filmed, contains scenes which under no circumstances should be viewed by anyone with a heart condition or anyone who is easily abused. We urgently recommend that if you are such a person or the parent of a young or impressionable child now in attendance, that you and the child leave the auditorium for the next.
Welcome to Creature Features, a horror discussion from geeksoftheindustry.com. And now your host, Chunky Larry.
Greetings, fellow insomniacs, and welcome to a very special edition of the Creature Features podcast on geeksoftheindustry.com. I am your host. My name is Chunky Larry, and in this episode, I'm kind of continuing kind of a sub-theme of, Nightmare on Elm Street, kind of in a roundabout way. And in order to do that, I brought along somebody that has some experience in pattern nightmares. She is the star of the fan film Don't Fall Asleep, a talented cosplayer and actress. You may know her as Sassy Sledgehammer. And now you, will also know her as Diandra Lazor. Before we started recording, I'd given her some shit about pronouncing her name, making sure I got it right, so it's Diandra. How you doing, Diandra?
You did good. Yeah, no, I'm great. I hope everything's been going well for you today.
It's been pretty aces. I'm extra happy to be able to have you on the show. Just kind of as back history. I fell in love with horror films at the tail end of the 6th grade, kind of going into junior high, a bunch of friends of mine, and this is a story I've told on the show before, so listeners are probably going to be irritated that I'm telling it again. However, last night of 6th grade, me and a bunch of friends, we did like a sleepover thing, and we put on a bunch of horror movies, because that's what you do when you're kids. You have pizza and you watch horror movies, play video games, Street Fighter 2 or whatever the fuck. And the coup d'etat of the evening was Nightmare on Elm Street, and it was the very first time I had seen it, and it was an awakening moment for me. And kind of from that point, at the tail end of the 6th grade, going into the rest of my life, I obsessed over this film series, and throughout my history, I spent time when I should have been paying attention in class, drawing Freddy gloves and writing stories and things like that. And I feel, and this is just an assumption, that the fan film is ultimately what that is. It's a group of people that love something so passionately and so deeply and truly, and they want more of it, and they want to, push the limits of the universe or the cinematic universe in this situation, and be in that world more than they're offered. And I'm not super up on fan films. I've seen a couple, and some are really great, some are not. And yours I came across obviously because it's Nightmare on Elm Street, but more importantly, it was narrated by Heather Langenkamp, so that automatically piques my interest, and I watched the film, and it's fucking great.
Thank you.
So with all of that said, I want to kind of find out about you. I want to find out, when you became aware of Nightmare on Elm Street, and kind of ultimately from that point leading you to this point. So, when was the first time you saw Nightmare on Elm Street?
Well, growing up, I didn't really have a lot of exposure to horror. My family was pretty conservative, and so if they had a scary movie on of any sort, it wasn't really that gory, and they wouldn't allow me in the room. I had to close my eye.
Like a go upstairs kind of deal?
Yeah. So from time to time, though, because I'm born in October, so I was always kind of curious about all the spooky things. My grandmother allowed me to watch the Universal Monsters, but I was always kind of terrified but curious at the same time. And I remember Nightmare would come on just whenever on any sort of channel, and it would always be the scene when Donald takes off the sheet and there's the burnt Marge going down into the bed, and I remember being terrified by that, and it was always that scene whenever it would be on TV and I'd flip the channel to it. But I didn't know that much about A Nightmare on Elm Street, and this is a very weird introduction to my fandom, and it's kind of fitting in a way. But I went on vacation with some of my family in, I think it was the summer of 2007, and I had a dream that was pretty realistic, that Freddy was chasing me. And I'd had other Freddy dreams before, just simply because I knew him and he's so iconic. And I woke up and suddenly I was obsessed with A Nightmare on Elm Street. And that was the beginning of my fandom. So then I went home and I started watching YouTube videos, and I started to rent the movies, and that was really my first exposure was from a dream. That's how it all sparked, and then I just got completely immersed into it because a lot of the characters, I loved Freddy for his humor and for I kind of thought he was sexy. I know that's a little weird, but I'm not the only one.
Yeah, no, there's a whole group of people that
that
fetishize Fred Krueger, and it's interesting, and I mean, there's something to be said about claws tearing at your nightgown. That is absolutely a thing.
Yeah, and he's got like that pelvis first walk, and the way his voice is. I don't know. There's something so sexy about him, and because I was so innocent, I was allowing myself to be corrupted, and I was kind of rebelling against my nature. I really liked Freddy, and then I watched the first movie all the way through for the first time, and I was really drawn to Nancy because she was so similar to myself. She was the girl next door with the big brown poofy hair who had a best friend who was kind of promiscuous and who really never gave up and was very resourceful. And I had watched Freddy's Dead before the original Nightmare, so I didn't pay too much attention to the palm trees because in my mind it was already set in Ohio. And since I live in Ohio, that was just one other plus. And at the time, as I grew up and watched Nancy more and more, there was a lot more similarities that I noticed between us. And so she just became my favorite character of all time, and I've loved her ever since.
And see, I kind of have a similar thing with that, and I think a lot of children, I'm not going to assume that you had an alcoholic parent, but I absolutely had an alcoholic parent. And, there's this, this element of that character of her having to find the strength to be the adult since she's the only one that's going to be. And, that kind of being her strength. And it says, your strength is you face things. And that's absolutely what she is. She faces things head on. And, she's the first, but she's also the most lasting. I would say second only, the only close second is Alice. And, some might argue Kristen, but for me it was either Nancy or Alice, and that's just where my headspace is, and much like you, I wanted to kind of be in that world. I'm 35 now, and again I started watching these films when I was 12. It's 23 years of obsessing over something, and wow. So I've had a handful of situations where I've tried to write, versions of a Nightmare on Elm Street, like a sequel or like a prequel. I tried to write kind of the ultimate backstory to Freddy Krueger, and I'd written one that it was Alice coming back into town, and fucking Jesse Walsh was, or it's not Jesse Walsh, is it? Jesse is the mayor of Springwood, and he's still closeted gay, and Lisa is his beard, and there's this whole thing where Alice's dad died, and that's what brought her back into town. It's so I completely understand wanting to accentuate that world, and you did it. You actually did it. You guys did something, in my personal opinion, that is right in there. It feels like it's a nice in-between point between 1 and 3. And I really dug that it kind of mirrors Nightmare on Elm Street 3 while managing to kind of be its own thing. But I also just kind of watching the film, I caught a lot of little subtle nods, like obviously having Alice and her mom in the fucking film, but when you talk to the doctor, the photo of Wes in the background, I love that. He's real, isn't he? And it's just like I caught a lot of those things, and I when I watched the film, it's what, 43 minutes long, something like that.
Yeah.
And it felt like it was done by fans of the series, like genuine fans. You know what I mean? Not people that call them the Freddy films, but the people that genuinely know things about the film that the passersby or the people that look at it just kind of on a surface value wouldn't necessarily pick up on. So can you tell me a little bit about the process of making the film?
Well, Paige, Michelle, Kim, and myself, those are the four or the three other girls that are with me who are behind the film, and we are all, of course, huge Nightmare fans, but mainly together from Nancy Thompson, and that's how we've bonded over the years. And in September of 2015, right after Wes died, when they Horror Hound Weekend had the kind of nightmare reunion, which was a happy, well, not so happy, kind of happy accident that it just so happened to occur after Wes's death. Nathan Thomas Milliner had showed his confession of Fred Krueger there, and I've known Nathan for quite some time, and I had looked forward to his film because I genuinely felt like it was one of those fan films that it carries the knowledge of the character of Freddy, not just Robert Englund's Freddy, but the true base idea of who Fred Krueger is. And I really think he executed that. And after the film was over, Paige, Michelle, and I thought, well, why don't we make a Nancy film? And then we just kind of laughed about it. And as the weekend went on, we thought, well, what if we actually did this? And by last February, we had gotten together to location scout, ironically, on the 29th anniversary of Dream Warriors, which was not really purposefully planned, just was kind of a happy accident. And then we started to toss back and forth a couple drafts. We had casted some actors from a local theater in Columbus where the movie was filmed, from Mad Lab down there, who were absolutely fantastic. We filmed most of the movie over 2 days in, I want to say, April of last year. And that was a process because it was a lot to get done in 2 days. And it was very, very trying on a lot of us, and we had to get back to work. And then we did some rewrites. We reshot some new scenes in June. We recruited Lito Velasco to do our scoring, which was a blessing to us, having done scoring for so many documentaries and having done scoring for The Confession of Fred Krueger and being a friend of ours. It was a blessing to have Lito on board, and we think he did such a fantastic job. And so many times he would send us little snippets and we would put them into the film and we would watch it and we would just freak out, like the homages to Dream Warriors or Alice's theme, anything of that nature. We really loved it and it added so much to the film. And then we did some editing, which took a while, and we had Dakota Thomas. He had done some kind of filling in of sound effects, and before we knew it, we were trying to submit them around, and we really wanted to show it at Days of the Dead in Louisville, which is where it premiered in September of last year. And that was really special to all of us because each one of us had pretty much met each other at a Days of the Dead. And it was, over the years, Days of the Dead, at least for me personally, has been very welcoming. I had a little event with them for quite some time, and that is where I originally started to, that's where I met Heather for the first time, most of the Nightmare cast. That's where I had donned those pajamas that are seen at the front of the film many, many times. I got to introduce I Am Nancy when it first came out at the Days of the Dead back in 2011, wearing those same pajamas at the convention where I first met Heather. So it was really, really fitting to show it at Days of the Dead, and we all loved the film so much, and we wanted to make this a movie with all of our knowledge and all of our passion, and it really means a lot to us to hear from fellow fans, especially diehards, that they can pick up on the passion and that they really love the movie, because that means so much to us. And we just, our gratitude for people even watching it alone is indescribable.
And you touched on something that I absolutely want to kind of circle back to. The music drops. There's a handful of moments like when Alice comes in and that little piece comes on. I freaked out. Like there were a handful of those little moments, just kind of, you know, and they're, again, they're subtle because they're just so, you know, perfect to the moment, especially what you're doing in the scene, that I really fucking was like, oh my god, they did it. I said they did it, I have to say, probably 7 times while watching the film. And you know, because I feel like some of these films that you'll watch on YouTube that are, fan made, like they see, oh, I got a mask and I got a claw. I got a mask and a claw. but that's it, and there are a handful, and Roberto Lombardi's performance as Freddy Krueger, to me, short of Robert Englund, is Freddy Krueger. So, and that's what I'm saying, is there are people, there are these films that exist that, if you're like me and you obsess over these films, they are there for you to enjoy. And, the fact that they're free is just an extra, added bonus, because, I'm a father of 3. I can't fucking go to the theater all the time. And so, to be able to be transferred to that world again, and not feel like it's just a couple of friends who went to Spirit and decided that they were gonna try to make something, because I've done those. I've thrown on the Michael Myers mask and the jumpsuit and had a fucking knife and run around chasing after people. It's not a Halloween movie, you know what I mean? And there's a difference between just having the pieces and thinking about, like, what it is, what you're trying to say, what it means to people other than, you, what it means to you, and you mentioned, meeting Heater Langenkamp, and I know I had met Robert Englund a couple of years ago now at Walker Stalker, and for me it was like, it's gonna sound corny, but it was like a religious experience. What was that experience like to meet somebody that you've idolized and kind of taken on the mantle for?
Well, I had been, at the time, it was a very different experience, because for a lot of people I know going to conventions, they're meeting these people for the first time, and I was, but I had been an evangelist for Nancy since 2008. I had cosplayed her basically through pictures until that point in time, and I had been promoting her, and I just wanted people to know more about her, and it just so happened that I Am Nancy was coming out at the very same time. And if you watch the music video, you'll notice all the footage is at a convention except for one person on a webcam, and that would be me. And I felt so honored that they asked me to be a part of it. And right before I had gone to Days of the Dead, I was asked to do an interview of Heather with a group of podcast hosts. And when I went to ask her a question, I said, "Hi, Heather. My name is Diandra. I'm a big fan. I'm coming to Days of the Dead. I have not seen I Am Nancy yet. I'm waiting to see it on the big screen for the first time." And she goes, "Oh my God, I know exactly who you are." And I flipped out. I could not believe it. And when I actually got to the convention, because I'm not like Nancy, like most of the time, because I did not want to meet her until I was in pajamas, and I did not want to meet her. I was so terrified. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to think about her. And I was walking around the convention in my pajamas, avoiding where she was, because I'd gone to see Mark Patton earlier, and I heard her voice, and I turned around, and there she was. So I bolted out of the room. I wasn't in costume yet, but also because I was just afraid of everything. And people kept coming up to me and going, "Have you seen Heather yet?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, she's asking where you are." And I was like, "Are you serious?" But that whole weekend, she was so nice and welcoming and enthusiastic about seeing someone in the Nancy pajamas, because up until that point, she had not seen anybody portray Nancy. And so over the years, I've had different costumes that I've brought to her, and she has loved them all, and she's taken photos of them, and she's just been she's been a good friend and a great supporter of everybody who loves Nancy.
I'm particularly fond of the new Nightmare costume that you have.
That
one's a personal favorite.
That's my favorite too.
Yeah,
and I have the limp going on and everything. So yeah.
And the amount of detail that you use with your cosplay is phenomenal. Like the one you did with the sweater from after she burned herself in English class. Like I had to do a double take. That's how good it is.
Thank you.
And seriously, anybody that's listening to this, if you have not seen any of these photos, I'm gonna post a couple when I drop this episode, just because I am genuinely in awe of the amount of detail that you go into with your photographs, and just embodying the character, and it's impressive. I don't know how to say it other than that. It's great. I really dig what you guys are doing, especially being able to reach somebody that you admire just through your love, and it getting to her and her embracing it. That's an awesome story.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
so you meet Heather Langenkamp. How do you broach the topic of, will you narrate this for us? Like, how does that happen?
I think we were, I can't remember. Did somebody had lunch with her or something? I really can't remember, but we just basically asked her, do you want to do this? And she was like, sure. And then she just worked with us along the way. And when we were trying to, because her voiceovers were done after we'd shot the certain scenes, and so I actually read the script so she knew the pacing of the scene, even if we had to do a couple more edits. And then she listened to that, and then we told her, do your own interpretation. This is just the pacing that we want. And then she gave it to us, and it was great to have her on board as to do tribute to the character we all know and love, and that she portrayed.
And my favorite read that she did is the one at the very end. This is supposed to take place after, spoiler alert, Nancy dies. Spoiler alert. But I really dug that. Did you write those, or was that a group effort, or how did It was a group effort. The original ending of the movie was actually going to be Nancy walking down the hallway, and she ends up in the doorway right where Dream Warriors begins. But as I started to think more about the movie, I thought, the whole message behind the film is destiny. In the beginning, she's trying to figure out really who she is and how she fits in, and she's going through life, she's studying dreams, she's studying psychology, she's trying to answer these questions, but she also has this chance to have her own life away from Springwood, and she's going to school, but she's invited to do this program at the hospital with the kids, which is Dream Warriors, and she's not sure. She doesn't know if she wants to do this for the rest of her life, even though she is Nancy, and several times throughout the film she loses that Nancy-ness. Like when she falls in the first dream, when she sees Freddy again, it's because she's lost essentially everything, including what makes her Nancy. And Nancy's not supposed to fall, but that symbolizes her falling, and so she has to rediscover herself. And at the end, when she accepts her destiny, she accepts what she's supposed to do, and that very end scene is kind of, we wanted it to be in there because we wanted people to know that Nancy actually doesn't die. If you read the comics, the Innovation comics, which were commissioned by New Line for a lead into Freddy's Dead, in our canon, Nancy's still alive in the beautiful dream. And we wanted to include that for those people who maybe didn't know about that. And also, it's just the idea of that destiny being continued. Even in death, she can't escape Freddy, and she will fight him forever. I couldn't have said it any better than myself. That was awesome. And it harkens back to the line that Kristen says, I'm going to dream you in a beautiful dream forever and ever. I love that. That's perfect. But I'd say that's probably as good a place as any to wrap this. So please tell people who are going to listen to this, where they can find you, where they can find the film, anything. The floor is yours.
Well, I'm on Twitter as Diandra Lazor, which I'm assuming you're going to put up the spelling of my name because
Yes.
it is
Oh,
so
I'm
confusing. So I am on Facebook there. That is where I've done a lot of my cosplay over the years. So I have everything on there. I'm also Sassy Sledgehammer on Facebook or on Instagram as Sassy Sledgehammer. Our film Don't Fall Asleep is on Facebook at Don't Fall Asleep :fan film. We're also on Twitter, and our film company, 3 Count and Go, is also recently on Facebook, and so we'll have a lot more movies coming out there pretty soon.
That was actually going to be the next thing I asked you is, do you guys have any other ideas for a future project?
We do, but we have one up there. It's called VHO, and it is about a driver who picks up a serial killer.
Excellent. Gonna have to give that one a day in court. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on to the show. For those of you who are here because of Diandra, did I fuck it up on the way out? Did I really?
Okay. Don't worry. I've heard everything under the sun.
Oh my God! Swear to fucking Christ. But if you're here for Diandra, right? Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Laser.
Pew, pew.
Yes, pew pew. If you're here for the lovely Miss Laser, by all means, if you're interested in hearing some more creature features, you can do that in a plethora of different ways. We're available on Stitcher, iTunes, geeksoftheindustry.com. You want to like us on Facebook, you can do that at facebook.com/creaturepod. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at creaturepod. It's been a pleasure. I would love to have you on in the future to talk about a movie, perhaps. But, you know, I really do appreciate you taking the time out. And tell Heather I said hi.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome, and I'm definitely going to keep tuning into your podcast because they kind of rock.
Oh, wow. That is a hell of an endorsement, you guys. So,
yeah.
For Diandra and for myself, again, my name is Chunky. This has been another episode of the Creature Features Podcast on geeksoftheindustry.com, Stitcher, and iTunes. Listen with someone you trust.
Death changes you. whether it's the death of those you love or even your own. I now know that as long as Kruger lives, I will never rest. I'm the light to his dark. And though I may have physically passed, my spirit lives on to keep the dreams alive and win this war. My real fight is only just beginning.